Good evening and welcome to this second installment of the Black Management Forum series around leadership and management coaching hosted by the Black Management Forum Cape Town branch. I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to this second installment, especially to those who were with us in the first installment of this series held on the 28th of April, where we spoke about the value proposition of coaching for members and the affiliates of the Black Management Forum. I hope you found as much value as I did in that conversation and took up the conversations with our coaches, our accomplished coaches that we have post that program. Tonight, we're going into emotional intelligence. And we've got our coaches here with us tonight as well, who will go into a little bit more detail in terms of what that is, where their focus lies in this rather broad concept of emotional intelligence, what that means, and the contribution that it has on your development as a professional and as an entrepreneur and as a human being, just in general. So I'm very excited for tonight's conversation. My name is Tuma Dube, and I am a member of the Black Management Forum here in the Western Cape and also serve as chairperson in the Nziga Impact Fund, which is an initiative of the BMF. And I will be facilitating tonight's conversation. I'm also joined by Umaloti, who I will bring on to stage, who will introduce our speakers. And we're glad to have the leadership of the BMF in the province join us here today. And so welcome to each and every one of you. And thank you for joining us for this program. But before we begin with the nitty-gritties of what our conversation is about, perhaps just a couple of house rules and how we are going to go about our program and how you can engage with some of the content that will be shared with you here tonight. Our speakers will have each a moment to introduce themselves and their focus areas, as well as have a presentation around this very important topic of emotional intelligence, self-knowledge for increased leadership effectiveness and productivity. And we're going to talk a little bit more about assertiveness and self-leadership within that theme. After that, we will also have a Q&A session where you can ask your questions to the panelists in terms of what you found to be interesting, most relevant to you, or what we'd like to learn more about. But as the program goes, feel free to use the comment section to write down your thoughts, share with us your perspectives, share with us some of the ideas that you have around what will be shared here tonight, and your quick question and answers so that you don't forget them by the time we get to the Q&A. Use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to record them there. We will read out those questions to our panelists to respond to when we get to that part of the program. If you would like to verbalize your question and think perhaps you want to add some context to what you'd like to know, also feel free when we get to that part of the program to use the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, and you'll be given a platform to ask your questions directly to the panelist. So having welcomed all of you here, the leadership of the BMF, our members, friends of the BMF, to this very important discussion, I would like, without further ado, to hand over to Umaloti from the Black Management Forum here in the province, who will give us a brief introduction of our speakers, and then our speakers will make their presentations immediately thereafter. Thank you. Maloti, over to you.
For that. Thank you, Tuma, for the warm welcome. I would like to welcome everybody that has made the time to be with us this evening. My name is Maloti Mutobi. I'm the Deputy Chairperson of BMF in the Western Cape, particularly the Cape Town branch. I have been with the Black Management Forum for the last 12 years. In my capacity as a professional, I am a designer working in the manufacturing space. I have spent the last 17 years in clothing and textiles, and specifically in the last 2 years, I have been within the footwear space. As advocates of managerial leadership, I thought this program would be truly beneficial for all of us, existing members as well as potential members, which we would like to invite, obviously through platforms like these ones, to participate, into the BMF and all the other various programs that we have as an organization. For me, I think specifically when we speak of managerial leadership, there's two things. The first one would be sort of hard skills when we speak about expertise, when we speak about experience. But we also look at soft skills, and I think that's what the session will speak, in greater length about. And soft skills is really about, self-management. It's about change management. It's about management of behaviors, and I'm really quite excited to unpack that with our guests this evening, and our panelists this evening. And I think for me, with a design background and working as a creative in the spaces that I work in, it will be quite important and quite interesting for me to unpack, because as designers and people that work in creative industries, we tend to think, and we tend to work, and we tend to operate with emotions, so it will be really interesting to understand how do we manage those within a professional space, and how do we best use self-development in order to make sure that we lead effectively and we lead our organizations into greater heights. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce, as I said, our panelists. First up, I'd like to introduce Mr. Malcolm Phillips, who's going to be starting with the program this evening, and then we'll hand over to the next speaker. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope it's valuable for everybody that has made the time this evening to listen and to form part of the session. And we'll catch up again towards the end. Thank you very much, Tuma.
Thank you, Kuma and Ms. Maloti. Maloti, you kind of gave me flashbacks of my career when you said you're in fashion and design. Now, when you look at me, you don't see fashion and design at all, do you? You probably think it's some guy there doing something, coaching and whatever. But I spent probably about 10 years of my life in manufacturing. That's where I ground my teeth. Before I moved into timeshare and into what we call it, in financial services. So one of my key areas is my first love was clothing. So yeah, it was so nice just to step into a shop. You see, there's the finished product. The thing that gave me stress is gone, never to be repeated another season, I hope, and those things. So yeah, so thank you for that. Yeah, so my name is Malcolm, everybody. Thank you very much for having me on the platform this evening. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. I am a executive coach. I work with senior leaders, executives, and also with teams specifically, and also working with managers that's transitioning from either specialist into a managerial role, or moving from maybe junior to middle and from middle to senior. So when you look at my life, like I mentioned, I started off, literally, my book is coming, Kuma. It's going to be called From Blue Collar to Chinos. I still must find the content, but the title is there. So we will get there. And the reason for that is that my life has been marked by so many transitions. And that's my passion when I work with my clients, is when they're transitioning from where they currently are to where they want to be. And tonight we're speaking about emotional intelligence, which really, from a very young age, I realized this is something that's very important. How do I relate to others? Am I a one-dimensional being? Are my colleagues, my peers, are they one-dimensional? When I make decisions, what's the impact of that decision? Is it rational only? Is it rational versus intuitive? What are the other factors that is really important to consider when I make and implement a particular decision that I've made? We find many times our senior leaders, they are very good, and we love them for who they are. The challenge is sometimes they are disconnected to the team because they've got a very good idea, but selling that idea to the team becomes a little bit difficult because the team does no longer has an emotional connection to that idea that they've got. So when we speak about emotional intelligence, is firstly for me to have a good understanding of myself, my own triggers, what kind of triggers my moods, what triggers my energies, what triggers my anger, and then also, how do I then work with that when I come to others? What's the impact of myself on others? Then the other aspect of emotional intelligence is my ability to be socially aware, i.e., to be able to pick up the emotions of others around me. And I want you to picture going into a meeting. You are having this wonderful, bright idea, this new thing that's going to increase our bottom line by 25% within 1 month. Kuma, I'm sure you've done that before, ne? You just shot the lights out. Everybody gave you extra bonuses just for the idea. The challenge that we find is when you step into that room, is the emotions in that room conducive to to the message that you want to land? Am I able to suss out to say, is this the appropriate time? Is this the appropriate way for me to be able to deliver this? When we look at that, we need to consider that it's not just about one aspect in terms of the idea. It is the connection to the idea, the timing, and all of those things. Um, One of the things that I used to do with my team when I managed the team was really we had this thing where we step in the morning, we kind of get a sense of what is the temperature like within the team without any judgment. So I could see that my team members are not going to do well with some heavy news. So we landed. So does it mean that you shy away? No, it doesn't. It just means that you respect the space that they're in. One thing that I want to introduce is to say that when we appreciate emotional intelligence and when we can lead with emotional intelligence and when our teams are emotionally intelligent, you will find an upswing of two things. Number one, psychological safety. And psychological safety is one of the key aspects for your team to be able to thrive. Imagine them being too afraid to tell you that they've made a mistake. Oh, this thing is going. And so going back to my clothing days, you know, I ordered 3,000 buttons completely wrong. Up to today, I cannot tell you how I got that wrong, right? Try to negotiate with the suppliers, try to do this, nothing happened. And you know, you kind of pack your little box when you picture on TV. You got this little box that you need to leave the office with, never to return. In my mind, I've packed my box and I'm like, but I need to own up to this. I went to the MD, I said, Bruce, this is my challenge. This is what happened. I've got no idea. And he sat me down. Now I could see anger, but the way he spoke to me, he says, Malcolm, thank you for bringing it to me. I know that you've tried and you've given us all the ideas of what you tried. And what happened, it happened. So let's consider this today as school fees. And I will never ever forget that. He says, let's consider this today as school fees. We pay university fees once, and we expect you to pass at the end. You've had your learnings. The next time when something went wrong in my department, not necessarily because of me, I applied that to my team as well. What happened? There was open dialogue. There's a level of trust that improved in the team. And that was really Bruce's emotional intelligence that kicked in. He could have shouted at me, he could have screamed at me, but he decided to go a different route and say, let's discuss this issue and path a way forward of how we're going to make sure this thing doesn't happen. Understanding that when I was sitting there, I was probably at the most uneasy space that I could ever be in. To be able to be that vulnerable, to be able to do that. So psychological safety for the team to be able to step up and to be themselves and to recognize is one of the effects or the call it the outcomes of emotional intelligence. The other thing that it also brings in from an emotional intelligence point of view is that it creates a platform for the team to be able to step up and say, you know, I am psychologically safe. I'm able to do this, but I can also be vulnerable. Now, vulnerability is not a weakness. Vulnerability is something that's actually going to speak to us in terms of, and I think Brené Brown, for anybody that has listened to her, you will understand the power of vulnerability. When it comes to emotional intelligence, it's really about me understanding my own triggers, who I am, linking to that awareness. There's also a thing called self management. So if today you are aware about something about yourself and you do nothing about it, the question is what value then does it have for you? Understanding your emotions, understanding what your triggers are, understanding the impact of your emotions on your team and the organization, and then being able to manage it is where the power lies. Being able to then say, okay, fine, I understand myself now. So how do I understand others? And Daniel Goleman, who is the guru of emotional intelligence, he puts it very nicely. He says that if you cannot understand your own emotions, you will never be able to read anybody else's. And if you think about it, there is an appropriate time and space to do something. And your emotional intelligence will be able to come in and help you with that. It builds confidence. It kind of gives us a sense of trust and integrity. You don't have to experience your manager, and your team doesn't have to experience you as when Malcolm wears the blue suit, he's okay. When he wears the gray suit, don't even go close to his office or anything like that. It doesn't matter which suit you are, they will feel comfortable to come to you to say, you know, this is where we're at. And it's amazing how your team responds to you as well. The other thing about the social awareness is really we talk in business about attracting and retaining talent. You cannot and attract and you cannot attract and retain talent if people don't feel safe in your space. They will come, and if you're somebody that shouts and do all of these wonderful things, they will leave. Those who cannot move, they will stay. The question is, what's the impact then on your bottom line? So we can see that from an emotional intelligence point of view, self-awareness, self-management, and then social awareness, understanding the emotions that's happening within my system that I'm seeing there, leads then to what we call the relationship management. So if I understand the emotions that's going in there, am I able to influence? Am I able to land my decision? Because now I know that Malcolm is feeling uneasy with this. What happens? I then change my strategy to say, I can sense, and it's very good to also call it out to say, Malcolm, I'm actually seeing that you are not feeling comfortable here. Question, what is bothering you about this? And you will find that then Malcolm's can open up and we can dialogue. So, Malcolm, this is my view. And because you've recognized this uneasiness, you actually are able then to be able to connect with him and be able to influence, to able to shift the dialogue, to be able to shift the whole narration. If we can get our teams to be emotionally intelligent, you will also find that the dynamic within the team shifts. You know that whole thing about conflict and where we work against each other as opposed to with each other. Emotionally intelligent teams does not have time for issues and destructive conflict, if I can put it that way. Conflict in itself is not bad. Ne? I believe in conflict. It brings great ideas and innovation in that. It's how we manage it. Your team will have a self-regulating way of managing it. Does it mean that I don't have to be assertive? And remember, and there's a difference between being assertive and being aggressive. Sometimes when we are not emotionally intelligent, we're not so aware of our emotions. Instead of being assertive, we become aggressive. And that becomes a challenge because question is, who wants to connect with you when you're aggressive? Do they understand you? Is there clarity in your words? So being self-aware and understanding what your triggers are. So when I work with my clients, we really go in terms of when you get angry, Kuma, where do you know, how do you know you are getting angry? Not how do you know you are. How do you know you are getting there? And our body has got an amazing way of telling us. And each one of us, you will have your own little thing. I've got my ears is going a little bit fuzzy, it turns a little bit red. Not yet for everybody to see, but I can feel the heat. That's my indicator to say, Malcolm, something is going to happen. And then I need to pull back. And then based on that, because I'm aware, it's like, Malcolm, you can feel this. What do you need to do? Whether it means that I need to be able to deal with, just take a breath, be able to manage myself, and then be able to step in. My own little trick that I do for myself is I engage in curiosity. I become curious. Why am I feeling like this? What was just said or done that triggered this? And then why is this important to me? And then being curious about the other person is to say, I heard you say that. What is it about that that's important to you? Or what do you mean by that? So really engaging in our emotional intelligence, we need to make sure that we are very self-aware about who I am. What is my strengths emotionally? What are my weaknesses emotionally? Um, generally we get triggered when one of our values are compromised. I think respect is a value that most of us hold quite dearly. If somebody disrespect you, it's an immediate trigger for you to respond. Question is not that you respond, but how do you respond? When integrity is something that's important to you and that gets compromised, how do you respond? Issue is not being upset, issue is not showing the anger. It is how we actually relay that to say, Tuma, I really do not appreciate what you've said there. Please let us talk about this. We need to be able to move forward. Because remember, within your business, your team is not just going to disappear tomorrow. And working in the same team and not being able to talk to each other does not help anybody else. So being able to step out of that and saying, do I know myself? Can I manage myself and manage my own emotions? Am I able to read the emotions of others and be able to influence that emotions that's there? One trick that I maybe just want to share before I close off is in my team, we had a little thing where we could actually share to say, today it's one of those days. I can see it's one of those days. And the team supported each other to say, I can sense that something is not right with Malcolm. Malcolm, how can we support you? And that's where you want to get to with your team, that the team starts self-regulate, supporting each other to forward the agenda. And so that we, and Mr. Mukadi gave me something which I never added on to emotional intelligence. And he says, we do all of these things to be able to live our intentions and also to reach our goals. The organization has got a goal. You can only reach it if we go together. We can't go together if I can't control my emotions and my responses to things. So that is my intro for now. Thank you very much, Kuma and Ms. Malote. I'll hand over to our Mr. Mukadi to continue.
Thank you, Malcolm. Perhaps before I do what I am mandated to do, just to add to the need to also, as professional functionaries, to look at the competencies that are associated with emotional intelligence. I think it might take us a long way if we start embracing the competencies that are so associated in our journey of becoming emotionally intelligent, but also emotionally matured. Colleagues, my name is Mukadi Mate. I'm an executive coach, but I also do leadership coaching. I also do coaching on soft skills like emotional intelligence, assertiveness, and the likes. I have been requested to talk about the effectiveness of assertiveness. And before I do so, I would like to make the following statements as precursors. The one would be that many people are concerned that if they are assertive, or if they assert themselves or state a fact or believe confidently, others might think that their behaviors are bordering on them being aggressive, self-centered, or egocentric. I also want to state that assertive people state their opinions while still being respectful of others. The aggressive people, unfortunately, go on an attack mode, and they tend to ignore other people's opinions in favor of their own opinions. And I guess the assertive behavior should be on values that looks at ourselves as being equal to the others and not vice versa. But the aggressive behavior obviously is where you value yourself less than you value others. I don't want to take for granted that you might be familiar with the definition of what assertiveness is. I would probably go to town about what assertiveness means, but for the sake of this evening, one, I want to state that the ability to stand up for your own personal rights in expressing your own thoughts, your own feelings and belief in direct, honest, respectful, and appropriate ways might be defined as meaning assertiveness. But of course, being assertive should also mean that while we respect our own thoughts, feelings, and beliefs, we also respect the feelings of others. Malcolm, when he spoke, he talked about being assertive without being aggressive. And I guess what needs to be driven home here is that you can be aggressive without being, be assertive without being aggressive. Unfortunately, there is also, and I'll talk about some misconceptions later. There is a perception out there that seems to suggest that when a person is assertive, they are actually rude. And there's a difference between overly being aggressive and overly being rude when one looks at an individual that is too assertive. You come across as somebody who's full of himself or herself. You come across as somebody who is egocentric. It is only them and nothing else but them. So the issue at hand here is, let's also be careful, because too little assertiveness could also lead to one being passive in the approach. I think let's put it on record, colleagues, that in our professional spaces, we are bound to interact with each other. We are bound to find ourselves in collegial teams and meetings. And it is in those environments that one has to express their opinions, for example. How you express your opinion could either be in a passive mode where you are not making a significant input, but it could also be in an assertive way where you are confident of the issues that you are raising and making sure that you are clear in what you are articulating. So you try and ask yourself openly and in a straightforward manner what the state of your feelings are. And you can actually link the state of your feelings to what Malcolm was talking about, which are emotions that needs to be managed. He mentioned that there are instances where these emotions or feelings are triggered. I will always say, and let me say it this evening, that let's be careful of what triggers us. Sometimes we allow unnecessary triggers to trigger us, to anger us, to excite us. And the question is, why are we even allowing that? But of course, as we become more assertive, let's also avoid being too accusing in our gesture of trying to communicate that which needs to be communicated. Let's try and avoid a situation where we react by blaming others and also becoming more defensive in our approaches of interacting with others. I guess the secret is keeping calm and cool, irrespective of the situation, irrespective of the triggers. Your attempt to remain cool and calm without blowing your top, without allowing the adrenalines to be on the high side. Do your best to remain calm and respectful, irrespective of the challenge that might be posed on you. Of course, a good positive posture in the aspect of communicating whatever, especially if you look at it from the body language perspective in trying to assert yourself. The body obviously talks other languages that most of us might not understand. And therefore, it becomes crucial that we look at what is important. I think, colleagues, allow me to also say how we handle criticism becomes important as we look at the overall posture of assertiveness. Criticism obviously can be useful when feedback is provided to you, but how you accept or how you deal with that criticism can be a challenge. I always say sometimes criticism can be malicious. It could also be unjustified or just plainly wrong. As an emotional, intelligent person, you need to be able to to differentiate between malicious criticism and constructive criticism. Where there is constructive criticism, of course, there are positive energies that comes out of that. But when the feedback is malicious, you are tempted to be reactive negatively to what is being said. So dealing with criticism might mean one being rationally and logically and not necessarily be emotionally charged in responding to the situation at hand. Criticism should be thought through, I want to submit, and not thought through. Because most of the time when criticism is given to us, the intention might be noble, but it could be how it is communicated to us. And therefore, it would be important, colleagues, that we take that into account. But equally, when we give criticism, let's give it in such a way that we can also take criticism. I am on record as saying you are not qualified to give criticism if you can't take one yourself. There are so many people out there who are ready to give criticism, but they are not ready to take one when such is given to them. So I'm saying, colleagues, you are not qualified to give any criticism to anybody as long as you can't take one yourself. How we respond to criticism, perhaps let me also be on record as saying we can't really escape criticism. In one way or the other, there will always be criticism. But how we respond to that becomes crucial. And how we accept it also becomes crucial. Some people accept all criticism purely because they are suppressing their own emotions in an attempt to please others. So an emotional, intelligent person looks at the situation at hand and say, if I accept this criticism, is because it is due and I'm seeing value out of what has been said to me, as opposed to seeing the negativity around what might have been said to me. So it helps, colleagues, that as we look at that, particularly if I can put the aspect of receiving positive feedback and the comfort that comes with receiving a compliment, of course, it makes us feel at ease. It makes us feel good. But equally, while it would make us feel good, it is important that the how part is not forgotten. The aspect of positive feedback, colleagues, is that some of us might be battling with our own self-confidence issues. Some of us might be battling with self-esteem issues. We might also be battling with self-sufficiency issues. So when a positive feedback or a constructive feedback is given, it is so given, and at times it boosts our self-esteem. It makes us feel confident in dealing with situations. So as opposed to giving destructive feedbacks, let's also consider giving positive and constructive feedbacks. I want to pause by saying that some people, obviously, while they accept criticism that comes as a result, it is important, colleagues, and I want to make this one statement. The one statement that I want to make is being assertive means being direct about what you need, what you want, what you feel or believe in a way that is respectful to the views of others. I'll pause there for now, Maloti.
Thank you so much, both to you, Brother Malcolm and Dr. Mukadi, for your submissions here this evening. A very interesting discussion to have. Also, a very fluid concept I have found for in terms of emotional intelligence, how to recognize it, how to develop it, and how to cultivate it in others or help others being able to become more emotionally intelligent, particularly within the context of teams that you are leading. You want your teams to operate at the best of their ability and able to relate with one another in the ways in which that will make them most productive. And then you've raised some very interesting points there. And I'm looking forward to some of the engagements that are going to come out of the Q&A sessions, which we will go into now. And perhaps just to remind the audience, if you'd like to ask a question, there's the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen that you can type your question there, and we can pose that questions to the panelists. You can also write it within the chat. There's a bit of engagement there in the chat, Tulani, really emphasizing what you were speaking about, Brother Malcolm, about how important trust is for teams to overcome even the most difficult of situations. And Namdagi as well, enjoying the conversation around conflict resolution within the workplace environment. Also very key takeaways from what you had submitted there. But while we wait for questions to come in, I'd also like to remind everybody that this is only the second of a series of conversations that we are going to be having with our coaches and our mentors. Today, we're speaking about emotional intelligence and self-knowledge for increased leadership. On the 13th and 20th of July, we'll be talking about coaching and organizational culture. On the 8th, just before that of June, we're talking about introducing team coaching and leading remote teams and building a culture of innovation, optimizing team performance, as well as team cohesion. On the 10th of August, we're going to talk about the competencies of leadership, role clarity, experience, and beliefs. And in September, we close off the series with a discussion about going back to basics and building and knowing your value as a leader and as a professional. And we can see how all of these conversations really do feed into one another in trying to develop really well-rounded and balanced professionals and leaders. And I've got a couple of questions, and maybe abuse my platform a little bit in the front of the line to pose these to you, Brother Malcolm and Umtatu Mokati. Brother Malcolm, you talked about how important it is to read the room, right? To know and be able to take the temperature of your team. As an executive coach, how do you go about developing someone to be able to read the room? What are some of the markers that you look for?
So, yeah, Kuma, thank you for that. I think the first thing is stop and think about feelings. You know, sometimes we charge into a room with a particular agenda. Stop and consider the feelings. Remember, I said we are not one-dimensional beings. So when you make a decision, personal decision, you look at the facts so that you're cognitive. You listen to how do I really feel about this, and then your gut tells you something as well. So you can never make a very intelligent decision in the absence of one of those three. And sometimes we want to go into a room just with the cognitive and the rational, whereas we're supposed to say, how are people actually going to connect with this? Now, how do we develop that is number one, that you need to stop and think, how will people potentially feel about this when I step into the room? That's the first thing. The second thing is when you mention something, be able to know the body language. So a lot of times we kind of, when we listen to words. And it's quite interesting. When we ask close questions, it's like, Kuma, do you understand what we're trying to do? Kuma will say, yes. It's like, and he's really sitting there, it's like, yes, but he gives that heavy sigh. I need to pick up that sigh and say, okay, wait a minute, he's not really connected to this thing. So I need to be able to step in. The other thing is listen to understand. And you know, we got this whole thing about active listening. So when you listen to understand, you suspend all your own judgments, and you're actually listening to what your audience actually have to say. So when you present something to your team, don't go in there to say, guys, I'm doing this, and this is what I would like to do. What's your thoughts? But you've already made up your mind. Allow your team to feel heard. That's the number one, because then you start experiencing, and then you can ask probing questions to say, so there's three questions that you ask. It's like, what do you think about this? What do you feel about this? Do you feel this will work? What about this, sits well with you, does not sit well with you? So you're actually covering from your audience, their cognitive, their heart. In other words, my emotions. How do I feel about this? And how does it sit with you? What does your gut say? Because if I can get my team to align all three and then go with me, I've got a committed team that's going to move with me without any issue. The other thing we also need to realize is that we all have our own unconscious biases. It sits there. And Sazi has put a question in our chat there. He says, we see the world not as it is, but as we are. And he's asking how true is that question, especially within our context. If I can only see the world in the way that I do, it means that my emotional intelligence and recognition of others will be very limited. South Africa is one of the most beautiful countries that you find with the most beautiful people. Why? Because we got what we call the rainbow nation as an example. That rainbow nation either makes a beautiful rainbow or we got a whole lot of clashes. We start appreciating each other, the clashes drop because we can respect each other even though we are different. And that's where this comes in, is to say that yes, I've got a view, but I'm curious about what is Maloti's view. I'm curious about what's Kuma's view, what's Mukadi's view. And that curiosity will bring us in to say, let me actually expand my level of awareness of what's going on around me and then be able to approach it in that way.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Mukadi, I've got a question here from Uzama Tikana, and she would like to know that how does one deal with a manager that does not demonstrate emotionally intelligent behavior?
Wow. I guess there's an opportunity for the person asking the question. If you have identified your leader as somebody who does not have a full comprehension of what emotional intelligence is about, I want to submit that you have an opportunity to introduce your leader to the aspect of emotional intelligence. It is too early, I want to submit, that you start throwing stones without allowing that person the opportunity to grow into accepting and appreciating the importance of emotional intelligence. My answer would be, in an event where such is identified, it is important that as the colleague and from a collegial perspective, you actually sit your leader down and say, this is what my observations are. Remember, we're talking about a colleague who is assertive. Be assertive in saying and communicating to your leader that these are your observations and these are your suggestions in dealing with the situation at the end. That's how I would address it.
No, thank you so much for that, Dr. Mukadi. And perhaps I could also abuse my platform one more time by asking a question. Brother Malcolm, you spoke. I think you mentioned Daniel Goleman. I think that book was written 1995, way beyond my time. My introduction to this very concept was perhaps Stephanie Vermeulen's Emotional Intelligence for Everyone. Has the development of this concept, is it a perfect science? I guess what I'm trying to know, with all the literature that is out there around emotional intelligence, is there an objective measure of emotional intelligence? And if there is, what is a good score and what does it mean? Like, how do you tell when somebody is emotionally intelligent, following from what Ntata Mukadi had just responded to?
If I can ask you, Kumar, just on that, if I have to measure integrity, how will I measure your integrity? How will I know what score to attach there? How does Maloti know that you are a man of integrity? It's not something that we can tangibly measure as such, but it's something that we experience. And for you as a team leader, check out your staff turnover. Check out the level of engagement of your staff in the meetings, because sometimes you'll have a team of 20 and nobody will say anything. Ask yourself the question, why is there really 20 people in this room that have got absolutely nothing to say? And that is a self-check for you to say, wait a minute, what is my relationship with like? When my people speak, do I interrupt them? Do they feel trusted by me? When they do something wrong, how do I respond? Now, I've had some brilliant managers and some very challenging managers. And I must say the brilliant managers showed me their anger, but in a respectful way. Can I maintain and retain somebody's humanity and dignity even while I need to reprimand them in one way or the other, whatever it might be. So I don't have a formula, and maybe it does exist, but your experience will be evident, or at least the experience of emotional intelligence in your team will be evident by the way your team operate. And if you really want to translate it into, because a lot of people say there's no ROI on it, a highly emotionally intelligent team, the bottom line will grow because we are creative, we are open, we can say our words, and we are able to, in a non-judgmental way, be able to handle conflict and be able to move up and come up with new ideas to actually take the organization forward because we all got one goal.
Yeah.
Perhaps if I may add,
Please, please.
Malcolm, I think let's also put it on record that Goldman is the father of emotional intelligence. But having said that, to the question, I think for me, Malcolm, it would be more a question of saying, we know there are established competencies that are linked to emotional intelligence. So in trying to check whether a person is emotionally intelligent or not, we would look at the associated competencies. Give an example. One of the competencies of emotional intelligence is self-control. Now, the question would be, if we look at emotional expressions from this individual, being the ability to manage anger, stress, or even frustrations, what do we find when we look and put the person's emotional expression on the rear view? But also we then say, let's look at how courageous this person is in managing fear, for example. We can even talk about how resilient you are in managing whatever disappointments that might be there, but also whatever changes and challenges that might come up. I'm only saying we can measure how emotionally intelligent you are when we look at the various competencies that are attached to the concept itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And maybe I can, Brother Malcolm, you wanted to add?
No, my eye just fell on the chair, on the Q&A here.
Yes,
Somebody's asking the question is, are soft skills really soft? Seeing that it's key in leading teams. And so there's this concept of soft skills and then nobody takes it seriously. These are what I personally call essential skills. Because if you can't lead your team in a certain way, your business is not going to grow. So it's actually an essential skill. The problem is that we normally praise and kind of promote people who deliver results, irrespective of how they do it. Now, I come from a corporate background, and for 17.5 years, I worked in corporate where we actually measured not only your output, but did you do it in alignment to the values of the organization? So if I can get that deal, but I'm stepping over every 300 people that I can to be able to get that deal, question is, do you want you in our organization? Because you're only getting us the results no matter what. And remember, we've got a social responsibility. And the one thing that is different in South Africa compared to others, and I think in Africa, is our concept of Ubuntu, where it's not just about me, it's about us. And so when we actually work on that, my emotional intelligence is not just about me achieving, it's about how do I empower others also to achieve? How do I support others? So that skill of being able to have that interpersonal skills is not soft, it's essential. To be able to connect with others, even when the chips are down, you need to be able to do that. It's not soft, it is essential. So that for me is something that is very important. So yeah, I felt there and I thought, let me just respond on that.
No, absolutely. I think I found it was an important question. Tata Mukati.
Can I just jump into what Malcolm has said in answering the question? I think the narrative around soft skills is becoming bigger and bigger. But as we engage in those narratives, let's make a distinction between soft skills, or what is called soft skills, and hard skills. I like the concept that Malcolm is introducing, where we start looking at soft skills as essential skills. Take, for example, emotional intelligence is amongst the top 10 soft skills that are required today in the world of work. Therefore, while we will look at the softness of that, if it applies to a leader, of course, at times you might be expected to be assertive. And being assertive does not mean you are not soft, you are hard. I thought I should bring that dimension into the conversation.
Yeah. No, an important dimension, but I've always wondered whether or not the classifications are necessary to begin with, right? These are all a set of skills that you must have in your basket to be effective as a leader and as a manager. Is the classification useful at all in terms of prioritizing what skills to go for or not? Or is it just our preoccupation with boxes?
That's an interesting one. Yeah, he's asking difficult questions, but he's asking the right questions. I think it's one thing that we need to look at is to say, what do I need to be an effective leader within an organization? And when I say an organization, because your leadership skill is the key transferable skill that you've got. So you can move industry to industry. I've moved from industry. So I've done manufacturing, I've done timeshare, I've done real estate, and I've done Old Mutual, which is like for financial services. To be able to transition as a manager through all those sectors, not my technical competencies could get me there, but it's what this names the leadership competencies, which is the soft skills, being able to influence, being able to connect with people, being able to kind of, help people to realize their own potential. That is what a leader does. And so if you want to be a successful leader, your technical skill, yes, it might be nice to how to make the dress, but to be able to influence others to make the best dresses ever is what's more important. And that is where our leadership competencies come in. And Mr. Mokade has mentioned it very often now, this thing about competencies. Do I understand the competencies? In other words, the ability to do certain things, to be able to execute. And that for me is where it comes in. Loiso's got a question there that I think we must not forget, but yes. I think, that we need to chat about.
Dr. Mukadi, I thought you might wanted to add something.
I do indeed. I wanted to say, let's be mindful that certain vocations are technical by nature. And where the appreciation might also be technical as a result of the training that one has been exposed to. There are documented research that suggest that those that their vocations are technical by nature ultimately robs them of the opportunity of having essential skills. And that is why it is important that technical skills and essential skills should be combined for the benefit of the holder of those skills. But at the end of the day, I think it is important that as we talk about soft or essential skills, let's also give due recognition to the technical skills that are there. For example, as a coach, I am not technically inclined. I'll use just one industry. I cannot walk into ESCOM, for example, and want to do other things that those that are technically trained are able to do them. That's just a statement I thought I should make as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And maybe we can go into a little bit more detail on this on the 10th of August when we talk about the competencies of leadership, and hope both you and Brother Malcolm will join us for that conversation and we can discuss this a bit further. Let's do one more question and then we'll hand over to Umaloti to give us our closing remarks. And it is a question that is in the Q&A section here. And it's asking, how do you remain calm as an emotionally intelligent person when you see that the person is disrespectful? How do you engage that person? And I can open that question.
So,
Malcolm mentioned this specifically, so we'll start with it.
So emotional intelligence, the first pillar is self-awareness. If you know that being disrespected or somebody speaking to me in public, reprimanding in public, is going to be a trigger for you. Now remember, to be forewarned is to be forearmed. When you have a level of self-awareness, you can start preparing yourself and ask yourself the question, how am I going to react when this happens? In the event that somebody disrespect me, how am I going to deal with that? In the heat of the moment, my wife is a very clever person. And she told me, Malcolm, nobody can make you angry. You choose to become angry. Well, some people make you choose in split seconds, while others allow you some time to choose, right? But it still comes down to your choice. Remember, expanded awareness. Now that I've got an expanded awareness of myself, I've got an expanded capacity to manage myself. And that is so, let's not wait for the minute when it happens, but understand, these are the kind of things that really upset me. How do I deal with somebody when it comes to that? And each one of our strategies will be different. Mine is literally, I've got space between myself and everybody else, even like with online things or whatever, to take things not personally, even if you say something that's disrespectful, whether to do with my race, my religion, or whatever, I make it your problem. But what I do is whatever you say, the words go on the table. I refuse to take on any words unless I understand what they mean. And then I pick up, because there's words and there's emotions that will come. Then I'll pick up, okay, fine, these are the facts, this is whatever. And then I clarify, is this what you mean? Is this what you intended to say? So I think this thing for me on that answer is really, once you know these are your triggers, ask yourself, in the worst of times, how am I going to manage myself? And remember, there's a reputational risk when you start acting in a certain way. And people start not taking you seriously because you're just making a lot of noise. Whereas if you respond in an emotional, intelligent way, people is actually, that one can hold his own. He does not let anybody get under his skin and actually be able to lead. And that's a leader that we want.
No, thank you very much, Brother Malcolm. We'll take that as your parting shots for this evening and on this topic. Then Mugari, 30 seconds parting shots, and then Maloti, please feel free to come in right after with your closing remarks from the branch. Thank you very much.
My comment would be, it is your right to be assertive. Continue being assertive. Thank you, Kuma.
Thank you, Dad. Maloti.
Thank you, Kuma. Thank you very much to the panelists. That was really insightful information, and I'd like to believe everybody gathered very, very, very valuable information as much as I did. So thank you again to Ndate Makadi and to Mr. Malcolm as well for that information that you shared with us this evening. For me, I think there's really to sum up from listening to both gentlemen this evening through the discussions we were having is two key takeouts. I think for me, one speaks to self-development, and I think what I understand about self-development, it's a process of learning, as it should be. But I also believe that it's equally a process of unlearning bad habits, of learning to do things better or learning to do things differently to how you would have done them before. So I think that's quite important to be able to learn to do that. And I think Mr. Mukadi also mentioned that, being calm, it takes a lot to try and be calm in a very otherwise heated situation. And I think that also speaks to, the spirit of Ubuntu, and the spirit of just being as humble and being as humility, and just being as humble as you can as you step up through the corporate ladder. The second thing for me is improvement culture. Malcolm spoke about the mistake he made about purchasing wrong buttons, and how that for him was school fees, and that for me really speaks about learning from your mistakes, and that really is when you make a mistake, it's not failure. You take from that and you learn something from that so that you can move on, so that you can be better. And that really, I think corporates and companies should really encompass the spirit of having an improvement culture where, when you make a mistake, that you don't necessarily get a written warning or you get fired or really harsh consequences from that. But again, having said that, I think it also speaks to being accountable. That Democracy spoke about, key competencies that make up this notion of self-development and this notion of emotional intelligence is that being uncountable also enhances growth, you know, and it enhances growth not only for an individual, but I think for a company, for a team to be able to grow, they need to be able to hold each other accountable. So I think that was really important for us to hear a bit more about that and to unpack those few pointers. And you know, last but not least, I really want to thank again all the guests and everybody that has taken off their time to join the session this evening. And again, I want to use this opportunity to invite all our friends, all our BMF friends, to join the BMF. You know, through corporates or as individuals, you're welcome to join. And I mean, there's various programs that we have through the different branches that we have, specifically through the Cape Town branch. You know, we've got mentorship programs, much like this one. We've got the SMME desk, which speaks to, you know, small businesses and entrepreneurship and so forth. We also have what we call a gender desk, and that really advocates for equality, and it advocates for women in leadership. So I really implore all of you to please you know, pick up the phone, send that email, and we will send you all the necessary forms. And I think just in closing, and you know, having invited everybody to join the BMF, is that there's a certain perception that I want to know, when I join the BMF, what will the BMF do for me? You know, what will I get out of the BMF? And I think through the discussion that we've had this evening with our panelists, is I'd like to challenge everyone to implement the emotional intelligence and the intellectual intelligence that comes with. Let's change that narrative to more of what can I do for the BMF, because the BMF stands where it is now because of members, because of the people that have joined BMF and made it what it is today. So I encourage everybody to, you know, to look at it differently and say, what is it that I can bring to the table at BMF? I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank all the leadership members that are here. I would like to pass a vote of thanks to Mr. Loisa, who is the chairperson of the Cape Town branch. I'd like to pass a vote of thanks for all the provincial committee members that are here present with us this evening. Last but not least, I'd like to thank you, Kuma, for facilitating this session you know, as wonderfully as you have. We really encourage you to keep doing what you do. Yes, again, to the panelists, I really, you know, again, to say thank you very much for that information and for the insight. And to everybody that is here, please, as Kuma has mentioned, that this is an ongoing session. We will be having our as part of the series, we'll be having our third engagement, and we encourage everyone to sign up. So have a lovely evening. Thank you again for your time, and be blessed.